Hey guys and girls, Board Now back with you, and this is going to be my non-spoiler review of the first episode of the new Netflix show. The show's called I almost said Deep Tooth. It's a Freudian slip. The show's called Sweettooth, and the episode is called Out of the Deep Woods. That's probably why I almost said Deep Tooth. So Sweettooth is the show, and yeah, this is going to be my overall thoughts on episode one, and basically summing up if I think it's worth checking out. So the premise is that it's set in a post-apocalyptic sort of world, and in this world, basically it's become common for a sort of a hybrid type human mixed with like an animal to be born, and we see this early on with a traumatic sort of birth of this wife of a doctor, and the main focus of the first episode is Gus, who is one of these hybrid type um, people, I guess, if you want to use the term people. And he lives with his father out in the woods. Basically, they're living in the wilderness, and that's because he has been sort of shunned by society as a result of his being a hybrid. And his father, at least this is what the father says to him, that they're living there to hide him from the outside world and the fears and the sort of threats that possesses the outside world. But throughout the first episode, you kind of get the impression that there's sort of stuff that the father isn't telling the son. He's obviously raising him sort of on their own in the wilderness, but there's sort of secrets that clearly the father isn't letting the son in on, maybe to protect him, maybe for other reasons, but he sort of raises him, and there's stuff like the mother has died, but you kind of get the sense that the father isn't being truthful about the way she died. But where this is sort of all going is that Gus doesn't know that there are others like him in the world, but at some point he's gonna find out. But also, it's gonna, I guess, maybe become this sort of coming of age, sort of youngish sort of adventure. I guess maybe preteen or teen, where he's gradually, without getting into any sort of plot details in the first episode, he's gonna sort of have to learn to fend for himself and deal with life and what potentially is out there. So a lot of the first episode is set up, and I think by the end we have a quite a clear picture of where things might go, and that there are things that they could potentially do in the remaining like episodes. Certain that I think things might open up and you might get more characters come in. I'll just say that without again going into spoilers. And just to sum up, this isn't for me. This show isn't really aimed at me, and it didn't do a great deal for me. The first thing I'll say is that I wasn't quite sure of the tone of it, if it was going for something a bit more comedic, a bit more kind of quirky maybe, or if it was just meant to be more straight, more of a, a straight sort of drama, like they're gonna, explore this post-apocalyptic sort of premise, and there was maybe going to be some horror elements at times. There's nothing really like that in the first episode. There's certain sort of hints and suggestions and certain things that the boy may be seeing, um, but I never quite got a sense of a tone, because the opening bit of it did actually feel quite sort of comedic and heightened and sort of like it was maybe meant to be more tongue in cheek. But then when we got into the stuff in the woods and with the father and son, it actually seemed like it was playing it a bit more straight. But it never quite found the right balance, not in the first episode, and I wonder if maybe that could sort of isolate viewers. Where I think maybe it might suffer because if it's going for this kind of where the wild things are type, vibe, or it almost has the feel of at least aiming for like a Disney type thing where there's going to be certain threats, certain dangers to it, but also I think there's going to be like a message type thing. So almost like it's aimed at like a young audience, but that maybe there will be like a message in the story sort of thing, and maybe there will be kind of more to it, a bit more of a threat. But I think it didn't really satisfy on either end. It was sort of like it wasn't as exciting or compelling or visually engaging enough to really be like an exciting, imaginative sort of Disney type adventure. The lead kid was not bad. I thought he was a decent enough actor, but yeah, certainly based on the first episode, it like didn't really grab me visually, and there wasn't really enough to the story or enough of intrigue to really kind of sweep me up in that sense. And I think also if you're saying, well, maybe it could aim for a slightly more adult audience, I don't think there was ever that sort of like the humour wouldn't, if there is humour, wouldn't really appeal to like an older audience, and so far there's no great sort of tension or threat which might draw an older audience in. So I don't know, I could see it like struggling to find an audience. The other thing to say about it is that the voiceover felt really jarring because there's a voiceover at the beginning and then you do get it at certain points, and the voiceover is partly what made me sort of unsure of the tone, but it is very jarring, the voiceover, and it talks in a very kind of this sort of quite quaint, sort of quirky sort of way where it's just very, I don't know, just very ponderous. It kind of says things like, this is no ordinary story. This is a story of a special boy. That kind of cliche sort of tone. And it just ends up being too distracting and sort of takes you out of it. And I think also, obviously, it just does feel kind of silly, the premise, and just because the boy literally does have horns on his head, and that's why I wasn't sure if it was meant to be a comedy, because or at least lighter, because obviously you see him originally at birth where he's literally a baby and he literally has horns and kind of like fur on his face, and yeah, it's very hard to see that and not laugh. And you sort of have that when he's obviously like getting older, because he's 9 in this episode for the most part. And yeah, that stuff does give it this sort of quirky, sort of twee sort of feel, which really wasn't for me. So obviously the way the episode ends does set up some stuff going forward, so maybe it might get better. It's not terrible, I would say, but it's not really for me. It didn't do a great deal for me. Also, the first episode is almost an hour. It's 53 minutes long, so I thought that made it drag a little. Then maybe that was a bit too long for what it is. But there you have it. That's my thoughts on episode 1 of Sweettooth. If you've seen it and you disagree, if you've watched the first one, maybe the first couple, and you're enjoying it, then let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Either way, but Yeah, not for me, but I thought it was worth doing a review just to sum up my feelings. So that's Sweettooth, and I'll be back with more reviews soon. Please like and subscribe. You can also get me up on Twitter. Also donate to the channel to help me out if you feel like it. But I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.